for Freddy.
All right, cool. What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 295. And we are coming in on this episode with a special, I guess, the second installment of our Watch 'Em All series that we're doing. We did a few weeks back, we did the Nightmare on Elm Street, the first two films, Nightmare on Elm Street and Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And today, we're going to circle back around and put the second installment together. And we're going to be talking about the third and fourth installment, Dream Warrior and the Dream Master.
Not just Dream Warrior, Steve. Dream Warriors.
Or plural, warriors.
More than one Dream Warrior.
But is there?
That's what makes it so exciting. Well,
yes, yeah, that's a good question.
We'll figure that out. But so
Dream Wizard.
But to circle back, like, I'm Steve, and you've said that,
Ron.
but who else is here? You got Ron and...
I'm John, and in my dreams, I'm beautiful and bad.
You're not dreaming when that happens, John. That's now. That's now.
Oh, man.
Before we get started, I have a story I'd like to tell about this guy. You all know him. He had me scared as hell. He comes to me at night after I crawl into bed. He's burnt up like a weenie, and his name is Fred. He wears the same hat and sweater every single day, and even if it's hot outside, he wears it anyway. He's gone when I'm awake, but he shows up when I'm asleep. I can't believe that there's a nightmare on my street.
On my street. Man, one of the better verses of that time, Willie Smith, Big Willie, killing it with that song. He had his own rap song.
But that's the Fat Boys, right?
That's Fresh Prince.
That's Will Smith.
Oh, so are you doing? Are you ready for Freddy?
No, I was doing Nightmare on My Street.
Oh, Nightmare on My Street. Oh, I'm thinking of I thought you were thinking of the one from the movie that we're talking about, which was "Are You Ready for Freddy" by the Fat Boys.
No, I'm talking about the one that I think we actually have to treat as canonical because it occurs between Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and 4. So, but when we finish 3, before we move on to 4, we have to take into account the events in the narrative of Nightmare on My Street, which came out between those two.
It's the connective tissue.
Yes, it is. It kind of is. It kind of is.
Right.
It's like a Marvel one-shot kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, sure, that works.
Yeah, man. That stuff scared the shit out of me. I was like, how could Will Smith, one of my favorite actors, collaborate with such a psycho? I never got it. I never got it. It didn't make sense.
Because Freddy was everything, man.
You're talking about Jazzy Jeff?
Well, early Fresh Prince, man, he was untouchable to me.
No,
he was.
I'm not even knocking it. I understand the role. I mean, it's like I think we all know the Will Smith story. Went in lots of different directions, but I think that I feel like if you don't enjoy DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, at least some of that, I don't know who you are. I don't want to talk to you if you don't.
You're crazy sauce.
Yeah.
You're crazy sauce.
That music is designed to be super enjoyable. You know what I mean? Like it's designed to be like it was. Yeah, right.
They were originally cast in the role of in House Party. They were originally supposed to be the two leads, and then they didn't do it. And then Kid and Play came and created. I'd say the first two are amazing. The third, crazy as shit, but I loved it.
Are you pumped for the remake?
I'm so scared. I'm so scared, man. I'm so scared because
they just announced the two leads last. I forget who it was, but I know they just dropped the names last week or earlier this week.
I saw them. I'm a little excited about that, man. It doesn't seem like that take a long time to film, just because it's no special effects. It's just people walking around and doing crazy shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am excited about that.
Maybe that'll be our next Watch 'Em All when we're done with Nightmare on Elm Street. We'll do House Party.
Would love that.
That actually sounds fun. That's just 3 movies, so we could get them all in one episode. So that'd be a brief Watch 'Em All. But yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. They came out in successive years. They came out in 1987 and 1988. This is that era. This is that time when they were just really cranking these things out. And what's funny is if you watch any kind of making of, they'll talk about it the way they talk about movies now. And they'll say, oh, when we finished this one and we saw how well it did, we went back to the drawing board and we knew we wanted to reinvent the saga. Da, da, da. They talk about all this development time, but then it's like a movie basically is in theaters the same time the next year. It's just funny to me the schedule that they were on and how briefly, maybe in that period, hiring new directors, getting, an influx of money, these movies were pretty successful. I do sort of feel like these two movies are both, they are stretching their budgets. I'm not saying the effects have aged that well, but they're both doing a lot with effects, and they're both like really ambitious in that sense, and inventive. And I think that's something about horror that I feel like I forget about when I'm thinking about what I love about the genre, is the just inventiveness, the literal inventiveness of the filmmakers, that they have to figure out a way to do this, like a scene that's crazy, especially with nightmares being the basis of it. It's like, how do we visualize this? And they, for $4 or $5 million at most with these two movies, I don't know. I just think that I think that people don't give them credit because later they seem kind of cheesy or they look kind of dated, but just how cool it was that they were trying so many things.
I think that's also like just that idea for horror movies, and specifically here, is that like they can become so dated because like they're constantly being challenged, and like these filmmakers are like always trying to figure out new ways to make things look better, not just special effects in general in movie making, but specifically in horror movie special effects, and kills and monsters and just gore and just scares and things like that. Like I just think that it's such a playground for low budget filmmaking that like they do have to get creative. And I think just the fact that every few years there's like this really impressive new horror movie that comes out that has something about it that feels really fresh and new, and it's because of that, you know what I mean? And special effects, they may not age 20, 30 years later as well as they maybe looked when these movies came out. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like these two specifically, you really actually, I mean, honestly, even some of the last ones that we talked about, I mean, the series in general, I think they do a lot with like Freddy, and like a lot with the kills, and especially when you kind of get into this like this phase of Freddy and where they go with the franchise at this point, because it really does feel, Dream Warriors is definitely like the demarcation point of like where they embraced like how much fun they could have with, what they could do in the dreams and like what they could do in nightmares and things like that, and made it a lot more fun and dark. So I mean, it's just really impressive that for my money and my opinion of the whole series, and we kind of talked about it before, it's like I think these two actually are probably like the best bang for your buck of the whole series, because of where they go with Freddy, where they go with the characters. The ensemble cast really kicks in, and you get to really know some of the characters, and you start to really kind of, I don't know, care about them more, like when their time comes to have their nightmare. But I mean, I think they really kind of hit a stride, and with the filmmakers and the creative team that were behind these movies, you just really feel like it kicked into a second gear in terms of a franchise with these two, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like this is somehow kind of peak Freddy in a way, because I in my recollection, it's after this that it starts to be a little bit more about the sort of elaborate kills and less about the kind of characters in the story, and a little bit more like Freddy's our hero, and so we're there to see him crack wise. And I'm not saying that the characters in the story are like, oh, he's so top-notch in these. It's just that they, like you said, they do work to make you care, and they do give you the occasional character death that feels like, oh, that person feels like they were meant for more in the story, or that's kind of sad the way that happened, or just you feel a little bit of that sting that you remember from particularly the first one, where each of the deaths really felt really close and personal to the story, because they were like people that Nancy needed or whatever. And I don't know. I think, it's like it kind of resists the tendency to spin out of control in a way. And I think that like sequel after sequel, especially in horror, the characters do become more and more interchangeable. And not to say that you're not starting to see that happen. And it is a little bit funny. And I guess particularly in part 4, we'll talk about like, here's a scene and characters roll up and each character walks up and says, I really love ice cream. And you're like, well, that person's going to die with ice cream. but in the third one, go ahead.
Something about the way these two are put together. They really focus on the relationships between all the characters. They let it breathe. They let it breathe. Everybody has a couple one-liners, and because the interconnectedness between the characters, you really do, like Steve said, connect with these characters in a different way. And the way that they set it up, the kills are not what you expect them to be. And I think that's really, you're like, okay, there's a black dude in this. he's gonna die first. He's just gonna die. I know movies. I know what's gonna happen.
Right.
And then it just kind of flips everything on its head and does a lot of cool stuff. Lawrence Fishburne being the orderly who is he has a connection to all these people. He calls them his kids.
Yeah.
Like you really do feel something. And Patricia Arquette acting her ass off. I don't care what anybody says. Patricia Arquette is doing something in this, man, that feels very almost electric. And I'm sad that, you know, she doesn't carry over into 4. That makes me super sad. When I saw that, I was just like, get the hell out of here. Patricia Arquette killed it at the third one. You really feel the emotion in it. So
well, we're definitely in the conversation about Nightmare on Elm Street 3 then. So let's just give a brief pedigree of this movie. It was directed by Chuck Russell. The screenplay was by Wes Craven, who it was back to, I think, kind of more work on a story.
Yeah.
With Bruce Wagner, or maybe even just give some notes. But the really interesting thing is Frank Darabont, who would later become the director and writer of big films like Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, and help launch Walking Dead as a television series. And the awesome Jim Carrey film, The Majestic, that no one stops talking about how great it is. But no, I mean, that's a pretty interesting pedigree. I think that these horror films, it's cool who's come through the genre. The fact that Frank Darabont did a polish on this script, it's like he's known for writing these kind of precise, scripts or that just really deliver these punches and that deliver these character moments. And I think that you can kind of feel that in this movie. You can feel the not so much classic structure or whatever, but you can just feel that they're trying to make a movie. They're trying to do something different. I feel like, particularly with this third one, from the very beginning, it really feels like they're doing something. They're letting you into this world in a different way. They're showing you different characters that we don't know and how are they connected to this Elm Street thing, and they let it take its time. And you talk about Patricia Arquette, Ronald. One of my notes in the first 5 minutes of watching this was just, and introducing Patricia Arquette. It's like she was a nobody before this, and here she is in this, and she is doing something. That she did something to legitimize it and to give it weight and to give it this mood and atmosphere right from the start in that opening scene where she's making the kind of paper mache house. I want to tell you though, she was putting way too much glue on. That was excessive Elmer's usage.
Yeah,
she plopped those drops down to put down the little roof slab. I was like, better not be pressing it down too hard because there's just going to be, everywhere.
Yeah.
But no, I think that opening feels like, again, it feels like the opening of a movie. It's like it's both an opening sequence with like somebody doing something over the credits, and it's intermingled with the credits, so it gives them some time to kind of let you into the mood. But it just felt like a movie. And having seen this movie I would say countless times, but this is the first time in many years I've watched it. It was amazing how familiar it was to me, and yet the feeling that this is a real movie and that this is like an attempt to do something filmically interesting, and like I said before, kind of creative and inventive. Like I felt it from the very start. Like this is this was made with a lot of care and a lot of passion behind it. It feels like.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you, Steve? I know that you love this movie from way back, but did rewatching it kind of reignite any thoughts or anything like just
yeah,
like a Pavlovian response at this point?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely my favorite Nightmare. I mean, this one
really?
For sure. Yeah, of the whole series, this would be the one. If I had to pick one, it'd be this, and it's mainly just because of what you guys have already said. The idea that you get like a really strong, great female lead, and you get, we get, not to get ahead, but like, you get Heather Langenkamp back, and you get this awesome ensemble of just these, these teens that have a lot of their, there's a lot of problems that they have before you even factor in, Freddy Krueger into the whole mix. So like, I just think that the setting at the hospital, the psychiatric hospital, and the way they kind of handle, the approach to, trying to use your dreams and your dreams / nightmares, whatever you end up being in, like as like a place of power, for like what these characters really kind of like in life and what they want to be in life, and unfortunately what they can't be at the point they are in their life. There's just a lot of like really interesting things like that going on in a sequel number 3 to a horror franchise. But I do really think it kind of sets the rest of the franchise off in the direction that it goes. And some are good, some are bad. But I think that this is the starting point where it kind of takes that course. And I think a lot of it just works really good. Some of the effects are really, again, yeah, they may not age well, but I mean, like when you go through this movie and you watch some of the sets that they built and some of the puppeteering that they did for some of these effects, they're just, they're amazing when you think they like made this movie for $4 million or whatever it was. Yeah. But yeah, like what John was saying, like the Frank Darabont, involvement, and also Chuck Russell, who is kind of in his own right, like a beloved, kind of genre director. The Blob remake is a great remake. Yes. I mean, it's a gem of a movie, and he's kind of got this 1-2, that he's got this one in that movie, and he did like The Mask and Jim Carrey. That's what you said, Jim Carrey. I thought you were talking about Chuck Russell, like he did The Mask. But I don't know, like there's just a lot of really positive things, while still maintaining. It doesn't get too far into Freddy being too hokey or too jokey or too much of that guy.
He's really not that much in 3.
Right.
I mean, he has a few lines, like Schwarzenegger-style lines, but it doesn't seem like that's his personality almost.
They've just done enough to insert him more into pop culture and to get him into the MTV generation and to make this movie, this and 4 really are like right in that mainstream of MTV. And when he kind of starts to infiltrate that, and there's enough in the movies that it can get that introduction into that culture, into pop culture, but there's a balance of like, Freddy's still pretty scary and like, he's not truly fucking around. Like, he really is brutal in how he like is exploiting, like I just said, like, some of these characters try to leverage their dreams to be power centers and like to be the thing that they can't be, and how he just like takes that away in some of these situations is like really mean and dark. Yeah. And but it works though, and that's really where that balance of all that is really where this one just kind of is like the standout for me of the series.
Let's give a little bit of just like a quick run through of some of the plot aspects, because I think the way this movie is structured that way is one of the things that sets it apart too from the other two. And the first one, you have the sort of set in the suburbs based around the suburban house. Nancy finds out her parents were involved. It's very local. It's very personal. It branches out. Next one gets more branched out because you're getting in a character who's in the house 5 years later, I guess, which seems...
which
seems odd. Right. Like the timeline's a little messed up there, but like we don't really know how long. It's kind of like Jedi in the Star Wars universe. People seem to forget about Freddy pretty quick in this world. That's just a legend. But I do think with Freddy, there's also the suggestion that there's some kind of like, it's not quite like It, where there's almost like a part of the magic is that the adults don't know, but there is some kind of silence amongst the adults, and they don't that they keep it quiet, and that the kids suffer for that. But the idea that there's, we're seeing someone who's clearly going through something similar to what the kids were going through in the first movie, Patricia Arquette's character. And it ends up in what looks like a suicide attempt. And you were talking about how scary Freddy still is in this movie. I thought that opening scene, like there was one image I had completely forgotten about, where she goes into the room with all the hanging kids.
Yeah.
Jesus, that's really scary. And then even though it was kind of corny with the way it's done, when she looks down and she's carrying a dead kid, except it's like a skeleton, it's a little too like skeleton, like a skeleton with a wig on kind of thing and a little dress.
She ran really fast with that kid, man.
But she's still, like... that scene though, where Freddy's like behind her in the background and he's like out of focus,
running towards her,
pretty scary. And I'm thinking then about they're kind of revealing him to us again, and they did that in the second one too. They kind of reveal him to you again, even though we know him and we know his little motifs, the scratching on the metal and stuff. But in that scene where she's in the bathroom, I was like, oh, wow, this is interesting that like there's something about those blades coming out
of the handles
and water.
Yeah.
That makes you think about how much blood there would be and how blood is instantly thinned by water. That always gets me, like the notion of like being in the shower and being sliced up, because it's like the blood and the water are mixing and you're just, I don't know, there's something about it that's just makes it feel so bloody, and then the fact that, then that's a pretty traumatizing, like, I could almost see that being triggering for some people to see that kind of just suicide attempt. This movie's got a very not blasé attitude about suicide, but it talks about suicide in a really harsh way and treats it in this kind of, both suicide and rape actually get used in this story in a way that you could argue feels a little flip for what that might do to viewers, but it adds to the horror of this moment of like, now she's going to be misunderstood. Her mom's going to think she's crazy. She's a danger to herself. So she ends up in this institution with these other kids. And it turns out, she's basically in a group, like a suicide survivors group of kids that have all been having Freddy experiences, and they've all kind of ended up here. And the coincidence of that would almost bother you if the movie didn't just barrel on into it and get into these like group therapy scenes and stuff where people's characters coming out. And I mean, it's actually, the coincidence is deepened by the fact that the survivor of the biggest Freddy incident is now an intern at the hospital, and luckily she's making eyes at Craig Wasson, the blandest leading man ever.
Neil
Gordon, the good doctor, Dr. Sims, the mean doctor. I mean, you get these sort of things sketched in very quickly, but what I was really feeling, and I was remembering too, was how I hate that sort of thing where like institutionally someone's screwed and like something happens and there's a lockdown and the rules change and it gets worse and worse for the people who are not going to be believed when they talk about what's really happening to them. And like, particularly there's a moment later in the movie where Sims like is very much in the right to fire Dr. Neil Gordon and to send Nancy packing too because of everything that's happening. You know, it really sounds crazy what they're saying, but we know it's true. I just think that kind of tension, it gives me it works on me. So throughout this movie, these kids are in this situation that can become increasingly perilous for them because they can literally be locked up in a room and then sedated, you know? So yeah, it's just a crazy scenario, and I think that sort of puts it. This is not the usual stalker or slasher Freddy movie, whatever you want to call it, because they're in this confined situation. It's almost like a psychological horror film on top of a Freddy film, you know?
Yeah, man. It really is pretty interesting to watch it. Kind of that, you know, parts of it being as grounded as it is, specifically when Neil is talking about the hotshot doctor that he doesn't want to come, and then Nancy comes, and it's like Nancy from the first Freddy. This did a really good job of reintroducing her in a way that just felt like, oh man, she's grown up. She has a little gray in her hair from stress, and she's ready to get to the bottom of this shit. And this group of misfits that she's introduced to are really likable. Even Kincaid, who is stuck in like a 70s style of acting that I feel really bad for any actor that got kind of caught in that. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
I kind of know what you mean.
There's like this corner that happened in the 80s where like all the acting got a little more grounded. Like if you watch Lawrence Fishburne, he's very much like, yeah, you better be careful or this thing.
Oh, he's supernatural. He almost
natural in it.
I almost wish we got more of him because he brings such a cool, grounded, centered, realistic energy to his role.
Yeah.
And I'm almost surprised more didn't happen with him in the movie. He almost seems like he would have been more like fodder or something. Right. In fact, my argument would be that we don't need Neil Gordon that much once Nancy is on the scene.
Okay.
So I think Neil Gordon, I'm not going to do this early, and I don't like rewriting movies, but in my version of this movie, Neil Gordon would be like seeming like he's going to be the leading man when Nancy comes around, and then he would have a death early in the movie, and then Max, the orderly, would become more her partner and helper and eyes at the hospital, because then you get Lawrence Fishburne something to do, and I'm not sitting there wondering why we're hanging out with these two stiffs whenever they cut to Nancy and Neil, because I mean, as much as I love Heather Langenkamp, and I think she's so cute and she's so pretty in this movie, and I remembered my crush for her when this movie was new, and there was certain things where I'm like, oh, look at her lips and her kind of buck teeth and her cute nose. I mean, I just love her in this movie, but she's also kind of stiff. There's one scene where she and Neil Gordon are at his house talking, and it's like they've done everything they can to make this scene dynamic. He's at the window with like noir blind, like shadows through the blinds cast on his face, and there's like city noises outside the window, and she's sitting by the light of a flickering fire and they still somehow manage to seem like stiffs or like a little bit bland, and then they cut back to the kids and they're a bit more dynamic. So I feel like one less stiff in the movie. Nancy has a little bit more to do, give Lawrence Fishburne more to do, and then I'm not sitting there watching this movie just wondering like all the way to the very end of the movie going like, why do I care about Neil Gordon? Like, of all the characters, and I don't buy his badass moment with John Saxon either, where he throws John Saxon against a post. I didn't buy that.
Impossible.
Yeah,
did you see how big John Saxon was? Like, he was just like jacked and older, which, he didn't stand a chance in real life. And it was crazy. Aaron and I actually joked about that because he actually kind of threw him. Anyway, he beat him up and kind of
knocks the table over. It's like, all right, let me get one thing straight. But
that would never happen.
From a character standpoint, I do think you're right, Ronald. Like the weight of like when we're reconnected with new characters and old characters and they have equal weight. And like Heather Langenkamp, the way she comes into this movie, I do love that. In a sequel to a horror movie, I love it when the character comes back. You know, the person who knows what's up comes back. The moment she comes in is it's another one of those kind of crazy moments. Like Patricia Arquette is having that moment where she's crying and saying the Freddy rhyme at the orderlies, and then like Heather Langenkamp finishes it for her from the door, and everyone turns and we see it's Nancy. But no, I think that's the kind of shit I especially loved at the time. Is like, okay, it's part 3. Let's bring everybody we can back. You know, let's kind of. It almost feels like this movie was trying to be the end of a trilogy. You know, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet they were trying to close it out, and then they're just like, nope. There's this in mind.
Yeah, not when it makes 10 times its budget.
Right. Keep it moving.
Yeah.
You know, there is a very interesting rule change that happens in this one, and that is Patricia Arquette's character Kristen finds out that she can bring people into her dreams.
A mutant power,
which is really fucking cool. And I don't think okay, Steve. I know you're like hardcore Freddy. How did you feel about this rule change being brought into the game? Because that's pretty big, man.
I think it's a way to hand the series off to a different lead.
Did you think that as a kid? You were just like, "Hey, when
I'm watching the movie, like, you know, it makes sense by the time you get to the end of it and you realize what happens to Nancy. But you know, I think even watching this and then watching 4 and what they do with that character, you start to see like what they're doing with like the idea of having like carryover leads or carryover characters from one movie to the next. But I mean, I don't know, like that rule being inserted is like, I think eventually you've got to get creative in like how you make this interesting and not just have the same thing over and over again. Whether it works entirely, maybe it's a little corny, but I actually quite like it. And I especially like it because like the scene where she realizes that and Nancy falls back through that chair.
It's awesome.
It's awesome. It's awesome scene. And like, it's like, yes, let's really do this. Like 2 of them against him. Let's see what this looks like. Like, that's the first time you really see like 2 characters interacting with Freddy at the same time in the dreamscape. You're in the dream world or whatever, which I thought makes the movie really interesting, especially when you see where the movie goes with the hypnosis and all that stuff.
I think it also works great later when they rejoin her, where she's in the padded cell, and their gambit works, and they kind of wake her up, and she's like, "Oh my god!" And I just don't think you get that moment in many of these horror movies where you are actually keeping the horror intact for the largest part. I mean, again, these movies aren't as scary. The first one is still the scariest one, maybe. Like the one where Freddy's the most like the real world with nightmare stuff leaking into it. This one, though, has a couple of, like you said, Steve, mean sequences where the idea of being with Freddy, the sadism of that character makes him scary, more so than like the actual atmospherics of them running around in a nightmare realm, which often looks very much like it's kind of like, you know, the sets are imaginative and cool, but they kind of look painted like a school play set sometimes. And I'm not even dinging it. I'm just saying, because I already said they did so many things. They're trading like control and like that kind of quality that you can get when you're striving for excellence and you're keeping it simple. They're going in the other direction. They're like, let's not keep it simple. Let's do everything we can do, and we're just going to maybe just do it. But there are still some really cool shots and some things that actually do still work in terms of the atmosphere, and some moments that are just kind of funny, but also, I don't know, maybe they were meant to be like, there's a moment late in the movie when Nancy comes after she's been fired to talk to the kids, and Lawrence Fishburne's like, well, they're in the TV room, and it cuts to them in the TV room, and the fucking TV room is like, it's got like the no TV and the scorch marks all over the wall from where their friend maybe like either was murdered or killed themselves in the television, and they know, but they're all just in. It's like, oh yeah, we've locked them in the room where their friend died. All these suicidal kids, you know. And I'm not laughing at that. I'm just laughing at the movie. Like, that's one thing the movie does not treat very seriously, is the notion of like therapy towards these kids. And even Dr. Neil Gordon, who's like the most sensitive character in that way, is like, after this one character dies, Philip, who we should probably talk about his death because it's one of the meanest in the whole series.
It's probably the best.
But he, after he's dead, like to console the kids and bring them down in the meeting, the group therapy session after that, he's like, what Philip did was a cowardly act.
Right. Yes.
Right. And it's like, geez, I mean, I don't think they're talking about suicide like that in
No, I think they are. He says it again. He's like,
Right.
yeah, he gave up.
Let's be clear, though. Philip sucks. No, but like, yeah, let's do talk about that death, though, because I think people mention that one as one of the most gruesome. I mean, you, Steve, you're a student of horror. What is it about that death that lingers in your mind?
I think the setup is just so great. I mean, like, you learn about Philip's character, and you learn his kind of thing is the whole sleepwalking, the sleepwalking angle, and
he makes marionettes,
and you see that he makes the marionettes or the puppets or whatever, and it just leads into like it's like your first dose of like a really, we mentioned it earlier, just like this idea of like what their little thing is how Freddy's gonna try to get them, and it's like you get the setup of the the puppets and the sleepwalking, and and you see that leveraged with a really cool like stop motion sequence with the Freddy puppet. And and ultimately when Philip is walking around and Freddy is like the vain marionette thing, like that visual is fucking incredible, and the kids watching it happen, trying to wake him up, is heartbreaking. I mean, especially
it makes it
when
super dark that they all see it.
Especially when you see how the kids are working together, like when lights out and like they go on these shifts, and you get first watch Joey, and they're doing all this stuff, and and it's Joey who is watching it when he sees what's happening, who doesn't even really talk. It's like the setup for the sequence is of most of the other kills in this movie or the series. The setup is just so great because of like the quick introduction to the kids, the quick introduction to how they are trying to handle it amongst themselves before they realize that Nancy may be able to help them. And also just like the first kill of like, who's going to get it first of these kids. And it's the one that's probably beyond Kincaid is like maybe the most outspoken, in the little group session when they're talking about things.
I was going to talk to you about that, Steve. I never noticed before this time. I don't know how many times you've seen this movie, Ronald, but I imagine you've seen it dozens of times, Steve.
Yeah.
I've seen it tons of times. This was the first time I noticed that there's a bait and switch with Philip.
Yes.
That we're probably meant to think Philip is going to be a main character because he does get every line he can get, and he's like even doing a little bit of like this is the James Dean, this is like a Corey Feldman-esque kind of actor doing a cool. He's like
that's true. Yeah,
it's like, all right, folks, let's think about this. I mean, he's like the guy who's kind of like being wise and a little bit precocious and maybe a little bit of a cool guy. But I think, you're programmed to think, oh, I like this guy. Or just like you said, he's outspoken. He stands out. I remember when I was a kid and I saw this, I really liked Kincaid too. And I think it's the similar thing. He stands out. Yeah. What you said, Ronald, that acting style, it is kind of true. It's a little bit more theatrical. I'd forgotten just how angry he is from the start, but it was all coming back to me. And I was like, oh yeah, Kincaid's whole thing is that his anger like feeds into his power, but it also is the thing that gets him in trouble, so again, that's yet another thing that makes him he's stuck in this situation where he keeps making it worse for himself by standing up for himself. But no, Philip, in those opening scenes, even when Philip is sleepwalking out of the room and Kincaid like stops short of waking him up and is like, enjoy your stroll, asshole. Right. I don't know. I just feel like it's full of those little moments where you go, oh yeah, they're building in like this character now is going to feel bad, or this, like you said, Steve, the horror of these kids watching him jump seemingly to his death, but they can tell he didn't jump, and they're unable to do anything about it. It is like, maybe you don't have to think too much about how he gets where he's going and what's going on in the hospital, but it feels like it's well staged. And for a horror movie, a scene like that at night, to juggle like 5 or 6 characters, it's rare. It's just rare in a movie to have that kind of moment at all in this kind of, like I said, slasher films, typically in the sequels, they get less and less ambitious. But that death does stand out. Does that one stand out to you too, Ronald? Is there a particular death that you, other than that one, that really stands out?
I say I'm blending. I don't want to blend them together because sometimes
part 4's got a whole different bag of tricks in it.
Not even a death because she lives, but when Freddy is like eating, Kristen,
the Freddy snake comes out.
The Freddy snake that looks so,
or worm. I don't know what it is.
Like, I mean, all the parts are being articulated, so it looks so scary. It's like his eyes are moving, the mouth is moving, so it's like moving in a way and taking these trying to take these chunks out of her body, trying to swallow her whole. It's burned in my brain. Like, just the eyes were so crazy.
It's a pretty iconic. Like, I mean, it's like, it's a really big set piece, and it is one of the top 3 or 4 things that most people remember about this movie. And we mentioned it on the last episode of the Nightmare rewatch. That documentary, the Never Sleep Again Elm Street Legacy doc, that is definitely recommended for anybody who likes the series. They talk a lot about that scene, and like there's some really cool like behind the scenes footage and like stills of just like the practicality of how they did that, and like her, like Patricia Arquette, like in like this like rigged things like mouth, and like how they're moving her around. It's just like a really cool thing to think about, like, you know, in whatever 87 or whatever it was, like how they were able to accomplish this on a movie like a Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a pretty cool scene.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the big effects, but it's by far from the only one, you know. So yeah, the fact that they had that large practical thing coming out, and it comes out so suddenly too, and it does feel like the way he's doing it, it's like, it's gross. It's really gross. It's really gross and unsettling. And I think that's the moment when she first calls Nancy in too. So that scene is just like, it ramps up. Nancy falling back through the chair and everything. I'm trying to think if there's another. Yeah, I have to say, I think that in terms of iconic moments, I think that "Welcome to Primetime, Bitch" is one that stands out in my mind a lot.
Yeah,
and I was thinking, is that the first bitch? But I think actually we did track. There's a bitch in Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, right? Like towards the end, he says "bitch" to somebody, but it's not quite the same kind of bitch. But am I wrong? Has he been calling people bitch all along? We might need to go back and pick this up in a future episode. I wanted to have time to, but I think we found that the first time he says it was not like this way of like tagging a line with it, you know.
It's such a tag
where it becomes like his thing to say. But that moment is very sad, and it also is funny that like every scene this character is in, we have to talk about how she's going to be on television, and she has to be like, my face is literally going to be on a television one day. You know, it has to be like as ironic as it can be, but it's also very sad. And her like burning herself with a cigarette to like stay awake, and we know she's like in this institution and she's a suicidal. It's like that's just one more. It's like a kind of a grim depiction of where these kids are mentally, you know, that like she's sitting there burning herself with cigarettes so that she won't fall asleep and get killed in her sleep.
Right.
And also the Dick Cavett moment on the television is still creepy. I did think him kind of going Freddy for a second and then it going staticky. I mean, you know, that doesn't even have to involve Freddy. Just the idea of you're watching some benign show and then suddenly something fucked up happens and it goes off. That's just a creepy idea. Like that always gets me.
Yeah,
that might be the first one. I don't know. I'm trying to remember what it was in Freddy's Revenge. I don't know if I can't remember if there was one in Freddy's Revenge.
Well, you know. Oh,
you know what it is? It's at the pool party, right?
When he pops up out of the ground, like
what I think that's the scene. I think it's when that grill catches on fire. You know what I'm talking about? Like when they're on the little patio, I think he does like look through it and say, I think you're right. Actually, it might be that one.
He says,
I remember, I think Bloody Disgusting. They have like a supercut of every time he says it, but I don't know.
Really?
I don't know if it like breaks down what the first one was, if it's just like a bunch of clips, but
the Terran thing is probably one of the most fucked up to me, like because it's like people digging and the holes are like
the little the puckering like mouths on her arm that's so disturbing. The body horror of that is so disturbing.
Oh, and then he like sticks it. I'm like, this is not a fun death. This is very cruel. It's fucked up. I mean, but that's what Freddy does. He like, you know, he takes that thing and flips it on its head, whatever it is, whatever your vice is or whatever your dream is. Like it's just, man, he really establishes in this one just how fucked up he can flip these things on you. And I was devastated when I saw that. I was just like, ugh.
To circle back for a second to the vein puppet, when so we go to the Halloween Horror Nights every year down at Universal Orlando, and a few years ago they had a Freddy house, or it might have been a Freddy versus Jason house. I forget which one it was. I think it was a Nightmare on Elm Street house, but they like recreated the vein puppet scene in the house.
Oh.
Like with Freddy and like the long veins and like the character at the bottom, like what that was like Philip. God, it was like Lauren and I, like we were going through it like completely just like geeking out when that was in it, because usually like they have this like things where Freddy's just coming out and scaring you, but it was like an actual scene that they recreated.
Oh,
and it was that one because it is a really popular one, but it looked amazing. It was like I couldn't take pictures because you can't have cameras in there, but like, or you can't take pictures in there. But it was like they knocked out of the park. It looked so cool. It looks so cool.
I just want you guys to know it was inconclusive. I looked. There's a compilation. There is like a supercut of him saying "bitch," but it's just different lines from throughout the series, and I can't tell if they're in in order. But I don't think any of them came from the first two. So the first one they showed was "Welcome to Primetime, Bitch," but maybe because that's just the most famous one. But either way, this is definitely the movie where he's saying "bitch," he's carving it into Joey. I mean, "bitch" it's happening. It's like
carved
it's
it.
the
Come
curse
get
word
him.
of choice. Yeah,
come get him.
Bitch, bitch,
bitch.
bitch.
And the font was so well spaced.
Very well,
like,
yeah.
He has really good spacing. Freddy, when he writes his demonic messages, the spacing, the font, amazing. Yeah. So we get introduction to these kids that are just getting it. They're getting it in ways that you just could not imagine. And
the only one we haven't talked about is Will, the wheelchair user who is a wizard in his dreams, and he has the most cringe-inducing his delivery of "In my dreams, I am the wizard master."
I'm a wizard. Oh man, it's so good. Freddy seemed to like especially love from killing him, man. It was like a joy in him killing this nerdy kid that just felt really like Freddy enjoyed that death. He's just like, I'm gonna kill the shit out of this nerd. He chased him, man. Like once you get chased, it just is a falling and being chased and
well, yeah, he sent the chair, like a deadly version of the chair after him, and then he makes a bunch of mean cracks about how he's going back into the chair, and it's the chair for you, kid, and all that kind of stuff. But then he then he just grabs him and kills him, like after the kid uses his wizard powers and everything.
Really hot? Nope.
Yeah. It's kind of like that with Karen and her knife fighting abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of think in both cases, if this were, unlimited whatever budget and time, we might have seen more epic battles or something. But I do think what you said, Steve, is like we see them use their power even if it doesn't necessarily work out for them. Just that they're given that moment of fighting back, that idea of fighting back is what this movie was all about. And I do think if you're someone who's freaked out by the concept, then you also are that comfort almost of being able to call someone into your dream and help you, or having a friend in your dream with you. Like I think that is something real.
Yeah. I just sent you guys a link. I've confirmed it is Freddy's Revenge. You were right initially, John.
Okay.
He has a line. We'll see, bitch. We'll just see.
Yeah, I think that's like in that. I think it's like in the fight with. I think that's against the girlfriend, isn't it? Or it's at the end when I think it's like in the final battle at the.
It's definitely the scene in the supercut where there's like a fire in front of him, and his like Freddy makeup looks like real shitty. It's like that. It's that one.
Okay, so yeah, I do remember that moment. I think it's from that final moment at the factory or whatever.
I think you're right.
The giant boiler.
But you're right. This is where it really becomes like
part of the zinger.
The real zinger.
Yeah.
That's right.
I feel like the guy that plays Kincaid was like, hey, if I don't get as many zingers as Freddy, I'm not taking his part. He has so many zingers in this movie. And he says it basically like he's doing a movie from 75. Like it's the delivery is like from the 70s in an 80s movie, which I especially enjoyed.
Yeah, he likes calling Freddy a pussy, and he says, what does he say? There's something he yells that's like, or this might actually be in the next one where he says, "I'm going to kick your ass all over Dreamland." I don't know. No, that's in this where I think he says, "Let's kick this motherfucker's ass all over Dreamland." Right? Yes. Right when
they decide they're going to go back in. Yes.
And he also in his dreams he has the power to break through pre-scored scenery walls.
Yeah,
that's true.
So that's something you really can't beat.
And then give himself a compliment about his strength after he gets through the barrier. I'm strong as shit. Like he's just very much like into his own strength, which I enjoy.
Give him something better than a chair. I don't know. It's like, I guess it would take strength to do that. It really would. But for some reason, that just didn't seem like as indicative of great strength. Right. It's like, really? That's okay. That's probably pretty hard to do. But either way, they all have their powers. Kristen can jump around. She's like a member of the team. I don't know if you remember the Mr. T cartoon, but he was with a group of gymnasts on that cartoon. And those kids would just do somersaults across the room for no reason. She kind of seems like that. Isn't there a kid who can do somersaults in Jurassic Park 2 as well? Isn't that like a plot point that there's like a girl with gymnast training in that who like jumps around on a scaffolding at some point?
Sure. I think so.
But anyway, it's always funny to me when a character does gymnastics as any kind of gift in a movie, because it is always cutting to the most obvious body double doing some crazy gymnastic move and then cutting back to the actor when they go, like up into the frame. But that idea of them fighting back, I guess we still, the team we get, the cool team that goes in together really is Kincaid, Kristen, and Nancy. And meanwhile, they're doing that while the tough and manly Neil Gordon is roughing up Sheriff Thompson. Is that their last name? Is it Nancy Thompson? I think it is.
Yeah.
And or the former sheriff. Was he still wearing a cop's uniform?
He in the bar he was. When he was drunk, it was very like he had like it was very. It was still his outfit, but it was very.
I think he was still okay, because I'm trying to picture like what, because he seems like he's down on his luck, and he has this really weird interaction with Nancy. Like I think they were trying to give something to the scene, but it's that weird kind of thing where an adult woman is calling her dad daddy, and he's like, "Oh, baby girl, if it's not my little girl, daddy loves you." It's just this weird scene that kind of
sounds like Ron Burgundy.
But well, don't you think there's a Ron Burgundy vibe to him sitting in that bar, kind of drinking in that way? But yes, maybe that's what I'm thinking about. Milk was a bad choice. But no. Anyway, that I do like John Saxon coming back into it. I kind of wish he had a little bit more to do, or that his character wasn't just kind of there to like suit this need. But again, it's all about bringing everybody back together and having everybody play a role. And this new wrinkle is added. We talked about the dream powers. We haven't talked about the new Freddy wrinkle. The ghostly nun of Amanda, the ghost of Amanda Krueger, who's also a nun named Sister.
Spoiler alert.
Sister Mary Helena, who is
that was a twist.
Yeah, that is the big like addition to the mythology of Freddy. That I feel like that phrase, he's the bastard son of 100 maniacs. I mean, to me, that's like his. If Michael Jackson is the king of pop, and David Bowie is the Thin White Duke, then Freddy is the bastard son of 100 maniacs. Even though I'm not sure if that's how it works biologically. I don't want to get too much into the gruesome fate of what happens to that character, but like, I think he's still the son of one maniac, right? Like,
right.
Just because she was with a bunch of maniacs that weekend, that holiday weekend when she was locked in. It's a really awful, terrible story, and it's kind of just thrown out there like we're not going to be disturbed by it. How did you guys feel about that when you first knew that wrinkle with Freddy, and also just how did you feel watching that scene now? It was kind of like the suicide stuff. It's just handled in such an indelicate way.
Man, when she said something about it being like 100 demons or something like that, about referring to how many times she got assaulted, but also like the demons. She said
100. She said 100 maniacs. He's the bastard son of 100 maniacs. But also, she says she was raped hundreds of times.
Yeah,
in the course
hundreds
of that weekend,
times. And
that's just horrifying. I mean, again, it's like it's hard to like. I don't know. It just takes me out of the movie almost to think about that. But it does create this weird idea of, okay, whoever Freddy's dad is unknown. He's just somebody who was one of the worst who was locked in this institution. So.
It just didn't age well. I'll tell you that. Like it did not age well at all. Like assault was handled so differently back then. So I'll just say that it was so jarring to hear the story.
Yeah.
Maybe I heard it when I was a kid. I was like, damn, that's crazy. But hearing it now, I'm just like, oh God, this is very, 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 very scary. Very fucked up thing to say.
Well, it's anytime, what's wrong with that almost anytime they do that is it's like any movie that does that. Why it's wrong is that if a movie is making you think about stuff that the movie doesn't really want to deal with and kind of move past it, it's like, well, that's a little bit like, I don't know, sensationalist might be the kindest way to put it. But it feels like you're now thinking about how gruesome that is, and the movie has fully moved on from it, as though it's just a little pulpy detail. But it does add this element of her being a ghost, which This is the first time I really thought about that. Oh, on top of everything else, this is a story about a ghost nun that helps a kindly doctor with this situation. You know, it's a pretty crazy story in that regard. But it also introduces the religious aspect. You know, we've got to give him a proper burial, essentially, which is like not present in the other two movies at all.
Yeah. What do you think about that being thrown in? I guess both of you who have seen this probably more times than I have, because it feels like this is the first time I've ever seen this movie. How do you feel like that piece of information adds to the mythology of Freddy? You think it takes away from it? You think it adds anything? And if it does it make it more interesting, I guess?
I don't know that I really find it all that interesting. Like I don't know that I like really, and just in general with like a lot of horror movies, like where a lot of the religious stuff comes into these films. I don't know that I really react to that, I guess, the most positively. But I think, again, like the same reason of, we discussed earlier with like, Kristen's ability to pull, Nancy in or stuff like that. I just think they're doing something to like try to build out not only, what the leads and the protagonists can do, but also try to build out this story, this mythology of who Freddy is and where he comes from. So I think, you see in some of the sequels that follow, they kind of lean into this a lot more, in some more than others. But I don't know. It's okay. It's nothing really that great to me, to be honest. But I see why it's been added, and it's like a decision that was made to kind of bring that into it, because there's a lot of power in some of those scenes.
I mean, I think that's exactly what it does. Is it gives them a framework. It gives them something to add in the third movie. I think the cool thing about it is that it doesn't really detract from the mythology of Freddy too much, but in some ways, just explaining where he comes from at all, it's like doing that to Michael Myers too. It takes away from the singularity of this person, like that Freddy was just a killer who did this, and then the supernatural part kicked in after the fact, after he died, and something, somehow he was able to come back. Putting that in a religious framework does take away something, but it doesn't really change, like it doesn't undo the events of the first two movies, which is all I really care about when it comes to a sequel, quote unquote, ruining what came before it. But I kind of know what you mean, Steve. It's weird to me how often horror films are like Christian films.
Yeah.
Like just that they adhere to some idea of like a Christian, and I think that maybe filmmakers wisely do that because it's in the culture and people respond to it. But it is like, if it's not handled just right, it can make what could be really scary and kind of unknown and unknowable into something that feels like a moral tale or something, or moral lesson, and that's a little bit odd. But I don't know if Freddy ever totally shakes off the religious imagery after this. I don't think it's ever quite as pronounced as this one, though. Maybe I'm wrong, but like the fourth one, which we're about to talk about, has elements of that in it, but it's not stated. I don't know. I guess if you get into the idea of souls, this movie comes up with this idea that Freddy is like eating the souls of the people that he's killing, and that they're somehow trapped inside him. And I do think that has a religious connotation to it. But I think without the Catholic stuff and the nun and the proper burial and all that, and the holy water, everything that's in this movie, I think without that, the soul thing wouldn't feel quite so Judeo-Christian. It would just feel kind of, demonically mean, like in a more agnostic way. Just, of course, he's swallowing their souls. It just makes what he's doing to it makes what he's doing to his victims more mean. That he's like trapping them for eternity as well as taking their life. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else in this movie that really needs to be commented on. I mean, there's tons of little things we could mention, but as far as like what's really big, I think we got to talk about how pretty that Malaysian dream doll was. Because Neil Gordon sure noticed it from across the room. And it's just this little trinket. And he's like, very pretty. And she's like, oh, that's my Malaysian dream doll. And she goes off to a different place with it. But it does give us the ending image, which is that he now has her Malaysian dream doll on his table, his bedside table, and he has the house that Kristen made. So at the end of the movie, it's the Here We Go Again. It's their version of the Here We Go Again, Freddy's Still Around, which is that the light comes on in the little house. I try not to think too much about the physics of what's actually happening in the real world when Freddy's doing what he's doing. This movie has its way of spilling into the real world. Like I believe that fight in the junkyard with the Ray Harryhausen inspired skeleton coming up and fighting them. That feels like it's in the real world because it's involving them out there, and it's his remains. But that magic, that level of supernatural, I mean, this movie really starts to change it, and the movie we're about to talk about, it becomes almost impossible to determine the real, like, what's happening in the real world when we see the dreams. Whereas the first movie, I feel like maybe even in the second one, that tension between, it's actually already starting to slip, because remember there's that moment in the second one where we weren't sure what's happening in the real world in this moment. Remember when his friend is out in the door and Freddy busts through him?
Yep.
But I feel like the first movie, it's a little bit clearer, like, okay, we see the dream, and then we also kind of we sometimes get a view of what it looks like to someone who might be watching that person.
Right.
But yeah, at any rate, I think that that, like, it feels like a pretty tight ending, except for that Freddy's still around somehow. What they didn't work. We don't really know why it didn't work, though.
Right.
Like, we don't know why it kind of worked. Like, it either worked or it didn't work, but it seems like it kind of worked. Like, it stopped him. But it also left us with a black man alive at the end of a horror movie. He didn't even die in the last 10 minutes to save the white woman. So, I mean, that's something awesome. Let's not, we won't talk about where that goes just yet. But at the end of this movie, we have kind of a core team of characters that survive. We've got Dr. Neil Gordon, never to be seen again. And then we've got Kincaid and Joey, who's found his voice. And Kristen, who's about to get reconstructive surgery before we see her again. But I don't know. There's something kind of interesting about that team aspect. It does make this movie feel different. That you are, even though Kristen is definitely the lead, and the surprise, I guess we should talk about Nancy's death maybe for a second. It's just that I do think that feels a little surprising. Like, you could have made it to the end without killing her, but it's an effective. What you said, Steve. We've passed the baton to this new group of characters, and they actually made it to the end. It's not just the final girl; it's like the final girl and her two pals. So, and
I was so sad that Nancy died.
And the way he rope-a-doped her was pretty mean too. That was another moment where Freddy was just being mean, appearing as her dead father. But that moment would have been so corny if it hadn't been Freddy. It would have been unforgivably corny to have her dad drift down on like these golden lights. And, like, Nancy, I just wanted to tell you, you've always been the best girl in the world. What did you think of that moment when Freddy's dying and the lights coming out through him, which actually is a pretty cool, I mean,
it's really cool.
It's a dated effect, but it's a neat idea that as the holy water splashes on his remains, it pokes holes in his dream self. But do you notice that he just starts spinning around like a happy little boy?
Yeah.
I don't know, guys. I just feel silly right now. Whee! And he starts spinning around.
Yeah, man.
That's the striking physicality of Robert Englund right there.
Yeah, man. He's so good in this role. And this really is, to me, if somebody's like, show me a movie where Freddy is the most Freddy, I'd probably show him this one. It feels like a good amount of the quips, a good amount of the deaths are really interesting. Some are cruel, some are fun. And this is probably the best representation of what I've come to know as being the image of Freddy. That my friends were like, man, Freddy will come in your dreams and kill you the way that this is the Freddy. So
Steve, any final thoughts? I know this is
man. This is I honestly think, if I had to pick one, this is my one. But I mean, I think as we're going to talk about, the Dream Master, I think it's also up there for me. Those two and the original were like my three. I think, if I had to do a top three. But I don't know. I think it's just to reiterate, I mean, we'll talk more about it with Dream Master, but I just really think it's where they really kind of shored up where they wanted to go with the franchise. And for better or worse in some sequels and later on, I just think that the approach of having a leader of a group and there's people that have a role and, you kind of see where their strengths come in their efforts, some fail, some succeed. But I think, you kind of get that dark humor in the series now. It doesn't get so serious, which I think circle back to what John was saying earlier, how Wes Craven and Hamburg, had they proceeded with their original script for the movie, it would have been a completely different movie and a completely different series. And who knows what that even would have been if it would have even continued or been successful. But I think pivoting to the way they did with this movie and Dream Master is definitely what gave them the legs, because these two are two of the highest grossing in the franchise, period. Like Dream Master is the highest grossing until I guess Freddy vs. Jason comes out. But, all three of them, well, this one and 3 and 4 are, especially for the time and, with inflation and everything, I don't even know if that's adjusted, but these were huge hits for the studio. And again, another reason why they, call New Line the studio that Freddy built. So I think, I don't know, 3 is just such a it's a rewatchable. And I love the kills. I love the characters and just like kind of that. Some of the corniness in it. I just like it. It just works for me.
Yeah. Now, did the box office get adjusted in some way, or did it add to it? Because I noticed that the first one says that it made 57 million. And part 4 made 49, but of the sequels, it definitely seems to be the easily the highest grossing. I was just wondering if it did the first one have some extra chance to make more money or something? I don't know.
Ask a question. I don't know. I'd always thought that, well, Freddy vs. Jason, and then I thought it was 4 then 3, but yeah, I guess maybe it's because of inflation.
Because the first one, it says $1 million budget and $57 gross. I mean, we can always dig into this in between. I just didn't know if, because I've heard that 4 was the highest grossing too, but today when I looked, I was like, oh, that's interesting that 1 was, says it made so much more than that. So
you're seeing 57, you said?
On Wikipedia for the gross.
Huh. I see 25.
Yeah, on the Nightmare on Elm Street fandom wiki, it says 25 for the first one.
Okay, I wonder if this is wrong. Right now on the Wikipedia, the popular site wikipedia.org, I'm looking at it. Budget 1.1 million, box office 57 million. So
maybe it is because of adjusting for inflation.
Yeah, for inflation.
I mean, it could be that. I don't know. I'm on Box Office Mojo, and this site sucks now because they changed everything, but it doesn't really let you toggle easily between inflation adjusted numbers and otherwise. But
at any rate, you can see that if Freddy's Revenge, the second one, if it came in at 30 million. So if it made more than the first one or less, the fact that they were able to come back in 3 and 4 and make so much more, like 45 and 49 million, respectively. It's pretty crazy, right? This is when these two movies represent the series, like reaching its peak, reaching its cultural saturation point, reaching that point where Freddy could pop up on like talk shows and commercials, and there was a 1-900 line and all that kind of stuff. Like all this stuff is this was when Freddy was the Freddiest that he ever got. I do want to mention 2 things about this movie. One is the bar in the alley in Taryn's death scene where she has the fight. It's Jake's bar. Was that the name of the bar in the second one? The leather bar? I think it might be. This might be another thing we have to confirm retroactively, but I think that that's a little nod to the last movies that.
Oh wow!
It's Jake's bar, because I just remember the name of the bar being kind of lame like that, and I remember commenting on it.
Jake's bar.
And the other thing is, we've talked a little bit about Freddy's look changing in these movies. I think it's worth mentioning in this movie what his look is. They're starting to kind of, I feel like 3 and 4 is kind of when they nailed down the look. But in this movie, there are some scenes where I really was like, what does he look like? And it dawned on me, he looks like used chewing gum. Like his face has this kind of like stretched and glopped on, almost like silly putty that's, someone's just stretched out and glopped on, but it's like he doesn't look quite as slimy and disgusting or as actually burned or as actually like it looks more healed up or whatever. It's like a symptom of them realizing he's the hero of these movies, I think, is that they make him a little bit more palatable to look at, just a little bit less like he has open sores or like his and I know you said he looks different in every scene, and it's true, Ronald, but it does feel like they're locking it down to something that's a little bit less viscous and wet and less so I think that's an interesting note, that this is when he is a guy who could pop up in more places and not just be a gory, like his face itself doesn't look as gory as it has in the past. So
yeah, the only other thing I wanted to mention before we go into number 4 was we didn't really talk. I mentioned the whole like crossover into the MTV generation, but the Dream Warriors title track that Dokken put out for this movie, if you've seen it, like the movie is in the video, and this is a video that like was big on MTV, and it's like a perfect example of how they were really leveraging that, the boom of MTV and crossing over with a music video from like a hair metal band, and like horror movies were kind of really coming into it, and it just was like a perfect intersection of like how to get into there and have this movie promote it just with a video that's in rotation, because the characters are in the video and scenes from the movie. It's it's the song that plays over the end credits, but it's definitely a good example of how they were able to do that, which I think is a part of what kind of took this one and 4 to another level in the box office for sure.
Boy, the mid to late 80s were full of videos where they used clips from the movies that the songs were in, and it was like a big deal when those videos would come out, because often they would be revealing footage from some huge summer movie, some blockbuster that was coming out. Well, since we're talking about videos and we're about to talk about 4, we now have to talk about what happened in between these two movies. Freddy is seemingly vanquished, his turning on the light inside the fake house that Kristen made, and he's next reported attacking the Fresh Prince. and like Prince. I'll tell you what he did. I'll tell you what he did to the Fresh Prince. He came to him, his Fresh Prince and his friends, they were fresh off a tour. They went to go see the Nightmare on Elm Street films. It's not clear whether they saw, I think they may have seen the first one because he's talking about Nancy and stuff. Then he comes home that night, and wouldn't you know it, when he goes to sleep, he dreams about Freddy. Now, Freddy comes to him and says, kind of similar, it's a setup to what he was trying to do in Freddy's Revenge. He's like, he wants to use Will as the body, and he'll be the brains. And luckily, Fresh Prince is pretty smart. He gets out of this one. He wakes up. His alarm wakes him up. But he holds his own until then. But it turns out his sheets are still sliced up from when he was in the dream. So it's kind of like, well, that may have really happened. Well, then he calls Jazzy Jeff to warn him, right? Guess who's over there when he calls Jazzy Jeff?
Who's there?
I'm not going to even... I mean, if you're a Jazzy Jeff fan, you might want to hold your ears because Freddy's there.
Oh, geez.
And you know what he says?
What does he say?
I'm your DJ now, Princey. Now, here's the scariest thing. This version of Freddy, it's almost like they couldn't get the rights to use Freddy. So he's a guy in a leather jacket who has stereo equipment coming out of his head. Like he's got like an equalizer readout for an eye, and like headphones coming out of his head, and like on his hand, instead of blades, he's got, I think, record needles at the ends of his fingers.
Oh.
But they're calling him Fred, and it's about, they're talking. So I wonder, like, no one has ever explained to me how. My only suggestion, it would be that after he was vanquished at the end of 3, when they gave him the proper burial, he had like a struggle coming back into the dreamscape, and maybe when he came in. He didn't have as much control. It's the only thing I can imagine, and he came through with imagery that might have been on the mind of the Fresh Prince because of the stereo equipment and stuff. So
it makes sense.
Because the next time we see him, he's back to the sweater and the fedora. So
yeah, this sweater fits him so much differently than it. It kills me, man, how different Freddy looks from scene to scene. It is something that I think is something to be marveled at, which is cool, because just like the kids, every kid that tries to reproduce that house, it looks perfect. Whether it's a little kid or an adult, everybody can replicate this house almost perfectly. And I think that that's something to be admired, because that image is traveling through all these people's heads. I don't know.
So yeah, the sweater, the house, these are all the iconography is back. Did you guys notice the beginning of this movie, which begins, it's trying to remind us of 3 with the opening where someone's doing a chalk drawing. It's kind of like Kristen doing the sculpture. But did you notice that's like, just by the nature of when you're shooting something, you like get a lot of footage of something and then you just use a little bit of it, that the person, when they were doing the close-ups of the chalk, they're not actually really drawing, they're just kind of grinding the chalk into dust. And did you also notice at the beginning of that, when they were like sweeping off the dirt to draw, they did a terrible job of sweeping the dirt off. It's like there's tons of dirt left. It's like you could totally tell they're doing like a stagey version where they're like, no, leave some dirt. But because then when they pull out, it's like a clean piece of sidewalk with no dirt, and there's no like evidence that someone was just grinding the chalk down.
I noticed that too.
But anyway, the idea is we're seeing like somebody drawing the Elm Street house with chalk, and as we pull up, we see that it's a little girl, one of the creepy little kids. That another thing that I think has slowly become more prominent in terms of the iconography of this series. And then Kristen's back. You wouldn't know it was Kristen right at first, but I think she says, "Come on, Kristen, get it together," to herself in a minute. So we're able to see that it's her. But she kind of has a little bit of the dream sequence from the beginning of 3, where she's in the house, she's in the Elm Street house, and she's seeing this stuff. But at any rate, at the end of this opening sequence, we kind of come to realize that Kristen senses that Freddy is back, and also that she's pulling Kincaid and Joey into her dream, maybe to such an extent that they're getting annoyed with her, that they're actually like, what the fuck? But that shot where she pulled Kincaid in, I thought that was actually kind of a neat shot where he's like sitting at his desk and he gets sucked back through. I mean, that was I don't know. I didn't expect that. And I had honestly forgotten that they did that. I do think something's lost with this not being Patricia Arquette. I think Tuesday Night, the actress that replaced her, she's doing fine. But them getting back together doesn't have as much weight at all with a different actress there. I don't know. Let's talk a little bit about that opening. How do you feel about how they got you situated in this new movie, which is, picking up with characters that survived the last one, basically?
I love it. I like. I don't love the missing Patricia Arquette, obviously, but again, we were talking about 3. Like, I just like the idea that they're gonna approach us a little bit with like some spillover from movie to movie, and like I like that when you see 4 for the first time, like you don't really know too much about how long these characters are going to be around, but I think it works really well to kind of again set up a handoff from a lead to a new lead and a new group that will have to fight Freddy, and some will live, some will die, and you'll meet them and you'll like some of them and not the others. It's just like this cycle that they can effectively work with from movie to movie. Now, it doesn't go very far into the franchise, but the idea that you can go from 3 to 4 and you do have named characters, Joey and Kincaid, I thought were I remember thinking that they were so awesome, that they survived 3 and oh shit, yeah, they're in 4. And Joey looks so cool with the longer hair and Kincaid's badass again. And it's what's going to happen here? But I do think that even in these movies, this is something that happens in horror movies, even to this day. You have, and I'm not saying that it started here, but it definitely is something that I remember, this is a reference point for me when I see movies that happen now or in the last recent past where you have spillover characters that unfortunately you lose pretty early on in the movie. It's just a nice handoff. It's a nice comfort feeling, and it kind of just spins you out into whatever this movie is going to become. So I think it all works. I like the intro again. They're kind of doing a very similar thing to what they did in 3 with some sort of creation in the opening, and you get a little bit of a reveal with Kristen. But I really enjoy that even for a little bit that we got a little more of at least the surviving Dream Warriors.
Yeah. So they're out of the psych ward in the same high school?
Yeah.
I mean, we're to believe that's something we didn't really talk about in 3, that they are the last of the Elm Street kids. The characters we were watching in that movie, they're the last of the children of the people that killed Freddy.
Right.
So the revenge kind of goes to them, but also maybe the connection goes to them. So this movie's a little bit about Freddy trying to Ronald, you and I are always talking about with our musical projects that we've been putting out, how to expand our reach. Freddy's working on that in this episode. He's working on how do I get broadcast? I need someone to pick me up on a blog or something. But no, there's this whole thing about them being the last ones, and there's a part where Freddy even says 1 down, 2 to go after he kills Kincaid. Yeah. But that's also Freddy kind of officially coming back. We should talk a little bit about that. Freddy's not all the way back yet. He's terrorizing Kristen in her dreams. The other 2 don't really believe. It's weird that they go back to not believing, oh, Freddy's dead, and we know it for a fact, and there's no way he could be back. It's well, how do you know, Kincaid? Do you know the rules of Freddy? I don't remember anyone actually submitting the rules.
Yeah.
But it gives us this time to kind of have that little opening scene where we see that she's got new friends and old friends, and you kind of get the idea that the new friends and the old friends might not mix that well.
Oh, definitely not.
In fact, I have to say, Kincaid and Joey seem a little aggro towards Kristen. Yes. In particular, I'm imagining that she must be really pulling him into her dreams a lot because they're just fuck, they don't have any real time for her. But her new friends, I love. We meet them in a quick succession, and we meet Asthma Girl and Roach Girl and
Karate Kid,
Karate Dork. That guy who plays Rick, her boyfriend. I could not tell for half the movie whether he was deliberately playing an obnoxious dork version of kind of a cool guy, or if he was supposed to just be a cool guy. And I still don't know for sure, but I came down on the side that that actor, as far as he knew, was playing a cool guy. I think it's just that he had that kind of dorky intensity. It felt like he was going for like a John Hughes kind of quality a little bit, and maybe even, you know, like before Jim Carrey was Jim Carrey, he had a couple of moments that felt like he was trying to do like that kind of intensity. But he really, like, there's a scene where he runs off down the hall and he's just like, you know, there's an intensity to that guy's physicality, right down to the fact that he's like a karate guy. And there's a long scene of him practicing his moves.
God, I love that scene.
Which is so funny because they added later the idea that his death would have to do with karate. Like, they were shooting and they ran out of budget, and they came up with this idea that he would have an invisible karate fight. So it's like the karate thing. Rennie Harlan, the director, said, "Why don't we just use karate as his final moment, because we already have that scene where he's practicing karate." And they were like, "Yeah, let's do that." And it's like, so wait. You were going to do that scene, and it had nothing to do with anything later? But my impression of this movie, and we should talk about this.
It's a montage.
But like Rennie Harlan, there's a lot of making it up as they went along on this movie. Like, the script was essentially unfinished when they started shooting, and there's a lot of talk about him in particular just improvising things on the day, coming up with the dreams kind of on the day. He seems like a madman in a lot of ways.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are you gonna say, Ronald?
Well, yeah.
Something's coming.
I don't want to talk over you. What were you gonna say?
No. It's just that movie was nuts, man. Like, I don't know if I felt the same way that I felt about the third, and some of it had to do with like just, I don't know, man. I just didn't feel quite as good. I don't know. Like,
it's not as contained. Like the backdrop is not as controlled or as contained.
Yeah.
As
it didn't feel quite as neat of a story. It didn't feel like as well written of a story. And then some of I didn't feel like when Freddy came, I was like, all right. I mean, like, I don't know, man. Like, but he was great. He was great when he came. I think the connectivity between the last movie, I think it's what we kind of said before. Kristen's recasting left a hole in it to me, like a real big one. And maybe just saying that she wasn't there would have helped or something, man. Like, I just could not get past looking at this woman and being like, you're supposed to be Patricia Arquette.
Yeah. And
sometimes I forget. And I understand that they were trying to create the new Kristen through the new character that was the master.
Which what did you guys think of that? That we just meet this character who's like, I used to hear, so he's like, well, I've never heard of Freddy, but I used to hear stories about a dream master, and there used to be a rhyme. I felt like that was so like weirdly vague and ill-defined that it's like it's like it made sense as the movie kind of made its own rules about that as it went along. But it never really registered with me. Like I felt like, is this mythology spinning out too much when you can just have another character be like, oh, have you not heard of the Dream Master? Right down to even having a scene where there's a lecturer at school, which is Bob Shea. The New Line guy. So like it's sort of a cameo by a studio chief, in a sense. But like, yeah, that just is such a weird scene where he's lecturing. It's just the strangest high school lecture of all time. This lecture about cultures and how they control dreams and how there's a positive dream gate and a negative dream gate, and the dream master is the one who guards the positive gate, and that a skilled dreamer can control their dreams. All of this is just like, what a strange, like, you really don't need that at all. Like, you don't need what's being talked about in the class to be relevant to the story at all. And it just feels like this strange thing that's like, wait, so you mean they didn't just go to a library and get the information they needed? It's like every kid in this school, maybe this is because it's Springfield, or is it Springville or Springfield? Springville is The Simpsons. Springfield is Nightmare on Elm Street. I guess if it's that school, they might have a class that's like how not to die in your dreams.
Yeah. Yes.
Everybody around here knows about Dream Masters.
Yeah, they definitely just kind of poured it on, and I think that's what it was. Like, it felt like a lot of over-explaining. One of the scenes where the cool brother was kind of explaining to the jock the whole backstory.
Yeah.
I was like, what is happening? It felt too like on the nose, and I kind of wish they would have spread the information around a little differently. I think
That's
that's
also
what
the
it
scene
is.
where Kristen's mom stops by just to say "on delay" a couple more times, and
Like she did in the,
yeah, like she did the last time we saw
like
her.
she did the last time.
But it's weird that she's the same actress, and somehow it's
Yes.
strange that she's the same actress and the daughter is not. I mean, although I wouldn't have necessarily wanted Patricia Arquette to come back to die the way that Kristen dies necessarily. I don't know. It would have been weird to do that. But I do think it's almost bold to do what they did with Kristen. Like, she very much... It seems like she's being set up to be the final girl because she doesn't die like in the first scene. So often the final person from the last movie comes back and they die very early in the movie, but she lingers a long enough time, and she's very stressed, and it's very kind of tragic to see her friends die and feel like it's closing in on her. So it's like a bleak storyline for her, and I do think it's a bold move to have killed not just the other two, but to have killed Kristen by the time you're not even halfway into the movie. And we've effectively passed the baton to Alice as the potential dream master of this, because Kristen got thrown in a furnace and came up with pudding on her face, and then jumped into Freddy's torso. That's also ill-defined, what's going on there. But the idea of him trapping the souls, we kind of saw it happen, and then she passes on her power, but not her soul. That part was vague to me. It almost seemed like Alice was absorbing her friends' souls as they died, which is really kind of weird, but it wasn't their souls. It was just their
powers, yeah.
And Freddy even says that later, that he's got their souls, you've got their powers, but I've still got their souls. So it does create, again, it sticks with that kind of maybe religious idea that we're freeing souls from torment, but it also gives us a handy little thing that can, that's a nice goal. It's a different goal than we've seen before. You're not just trying to stop Freddy. You're trying to free all the souls, all the naked souls that are writhing around inside them and pushing their boobs up against plastic.
Would you expect anything less from Rennie Harlan?
No, I would not. You know exactly. What do you know who that is that was inside there?
No.
Like, not anywhere else in the movie, but Scream Queen Linnea Quigley.
Oh,
actress who's in so many movies taking her top off. They brought her in just to writhe around inside Freddy.
Wow.
Really?
That's wild.
That is wild.
I feel like, honestly, like I just like forgive way too much of this stuff, but like I don't even think about any of these like plot holes or like these new rules being added that we have gone over so much. Like all this weird shit that just drops into these movies. I am just like 100% like,
you just like bring it on.
Bring it on. Like
you're on the roller coaster ride.
Just like whatever you want to say is supposed to be happening right now. Make it look cool, make it fun, give me some sort of interesting character, maybe. It's silly. This one is very silly. And it's definitely like what you said, John, about like, kind of being written, developed, shot on the fly, things changing. Like I think that really is, you can kind of feel it, that it really wasn't. And especially when you're saying it comes out like a year later, like these things are being pumped out quick. And it shows a little bit. But that said, I think in general, you mentioned the characters that you kind of meet quickly, like her group of friends, and Rick and Alice, and
Deb,
and
Deb, who loves to work out and hates roaches.
Yeah,
I mean,
you don't need to know more
that's
about
like
it. That's two things.
That's like that's it. She got
that's two things. Well, no, then what's her name? Sheila. She makes inventions, and
but has asthma.
But the fact that she makes an invention that was designed to scare off roaches, but that if you like plug electricity into it, it can become like a weapon from Ghostbusters. That's pretty cool. Sheila's like the unsung hero of this movie in some ways.
Right. So you have like their weakness and their strength, and one gets the other, I guess. But
yeah.
I don't know. I just think it's a really fun movie. I really do. I kind of really like the Rick character. I do know what you're saying. Like you don't know if he's supposed to be like
a dweeb or a
like which guy from Pretty in Pink is he supposed to be?
Exactly.
Like,
no, exactly.
Like is he Ducky or is he? Yeah. Or
it's a good question. Yeah.
He definitely saw and enjoyed those performances. He was like, you know what I love about that movie? I don't know who I love better, James Spader or Andrew McCarthy, or John Cryer. I don't know. Harry Dean Stanton, throw him in. I'll do a little bit of
them all together.
No, but you're right. He is like a grounded guy, and like there are moments where he's like trying to be a good guy, and he doesn't quite know. But at that moment where he's like, I just don't want to talk about fucking Freddy anymore. There's a part of me that's like, that's kind of I kind of felt that character moment at that point. It's like, yes, I've seen people die. Yes, weird shit is going on, but can we just not like I'm not there yet. It reminds me
Yeah.
of Glenn in the first movie, the Johnny Depp
Yes.
character, where it's like he
Yeah.
believed something was going on, but he was not quite there yet. No, I think you're right. He was likable. What did you think of his death? His death scene is really kind of a lame ass scene.
It is super lame. It is super lame, but like anything like that just him doing the all the karate to Dramarama is just like I love that. I eat that scene up every time. Like I love that song and that
You mean
song.
1988, the scene? Like that's
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a cool scene. I mean, it's kind of silly. It's super silly, but when you say that out loud, it sounds stupid as hell. But like you're like, if you got to get creative, like how else would you have done that in that scene if you had that footage? You know, it's like it's silly enough, but it's also like different. Where like
I might have had him cleaning his room at the same time while he was doing that and dancing around and putting on sunglasses.
Yeah, maybe that would have worked.
Using his butt to close a drawer, like in part 2.
It's just like, because you don't have Freddy, but you do have the glove, they at least get something in there and it's got its own little, like, you can kind of track it. I don't know. It's Freddy is definitely the scene that he's in. Like, it's dialed up, Freddy putting on sunglasses, and like, it's just like, you really are kicking it in here. Like it gets a little silly, but it's fucking, I just think it's so fun. It's so fun.
Yeah,
it really is. And you just get into all these scenes that we keep talking about, like, not to just labor over it again, but just when you get into the kills for the friends, as they get picked off one by one, and interestingly, who survives and who doesn't. Some of the stuff, like the suck face, like with Sheila, is fucking fucked up.
Yeah,
like it is.
That's gruesome.
Brutal.
That is a
so
disturbing death. That is a really disturbing death, because it's like it's got that element of sexual assault thrown in.
Yeah, it is horrible.
And the actress loves it. Like if you see her in the documentary, the actress that plays
totally.
Sheila, she's like, I love my death scene. That was my first on-screen kiss. Like she loves saying that.
Yeah.
But she also, if you saw the documentaries, you also know that Rennie Harlan came up to her and told her, we were going to have to dub all your lines because you don't sound like a black girl.
Oh,
and then she
right.
pushed back.
Right.
And he now says like, I don't remember that. And she said, hey, I'd claim I don't remember it too.
That's nuts.
But supposedly he apologized to her after the fact and said like he didn't understand enough about American culture to understand that like what she was doing was going to work. That in his mind it was kind of, I mean, it was similar to like, we talked a little bit about Kincaid's acting style, but he's definitely doing the sort of like slightly more stereotypical, like, wisecracking. He's got the lines sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I do remember thinking Sheila was a very atypical role for or character for a black girl in that time. I mean, I was just noticing that, and so maybe that's something the actress actually kind of created and fought for a little bit. She's very much written as the character that she is, so it's kind of strange that he wanted her to be some kind of a caricature.
Otherwise, yeah.
On top, if she was a different kind of caricature, a nerd caricature, but at any rate,
what do you guys?
The Rennie Harlan aspect of it. I just want to say one thing.
Yeah,
one thing he said about this movie repeatedly is that his standard was like, "Oh, teenage boys are going to love this. Oh, the teenage boys are going to love this." So like that's what this movie is. It's Rennie Harlan's idea of what like a 15-year-old American boy wanted to see, and that's why there's boobs.
Makes sense.
And, cuss words and fun.
What do you guys think of Alice? Where does she stack? How does she stack up? What do you think of the character? Like the change that her character goes through, like as she starts to kind of,
I kind of like Alice's arc. I don't know how much I feel about like I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I did find myself thinking about how she is at the beginning of the movie and how she is at the end, and that they actually arrived there pretty smoothly. Like it's not like I don't remember her feeling like she got a makeover. There is that preparation scene where she takes a totem of each one of her friends and kind of attaches it to herself. And some of that's kind of corny, but like the idea of she's emerging from this different, I felt like I kind of bought that aspect, that she became a more confident person as the movie went along. And I don't remember it being like, oh, then one day she woke up and started doing her hair differently or something. So I guess I'd say I like that aspect of it. Her as a character, it's not like a hugely dynamic character, but that's kind of the idea, is that you're almost supposed to think she's not that interesting at the. I really do think they were
Right.
trying to trick us a little bit with who's going to emerge.
Who's going to be the leader?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't.
I think that she was meant to be the spiritual replacement for Patricia Arquette's character. She does have a lot of cool aspects of her character. I mean, you know, her dad indicated that she dresses terribly at the beginning of the movie, and then which was really weird,
right? Because
like,
normally when someone says you're going out wearing that, it's because it's like skimpy.
Yeah.
But she's like
No,
totally.
it was
It's the opposite thing. He's just
you're a laugh.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of reaction to it. And you know, as she turns into a cool. I could tell you if I saw this as like an 8 or 9 year old, and I saw her getting gradually cooler, this would set my world on fire, because she was obviously a very pretty woman, and you know, she just gets a little more confident.
Yeah.
And when you see her doing, getting more confident, and it's weird that as misogynistic as these movies are, they really do empower the woman lead in it, and really do make them kind of like, destiny is in my hands. I'm gonna beat the shit, because the guys are kind of flailing a lot of the times in these movies, and the women kind of take command, and they're amazing. And I think that's one thing that I hadn't seen besides these movies, honestly. A lot of the times was like they had a plan, they had magic. They could bring she could bring dogs in, and Kincaid just
dog Jason.
Yeah.
Yes, I thought that was really interesting. And he's like, that doesn't mean dick when the dog bit. Why wouldn't it mean dick that a dog bit a person and they're bleeding out? The dog was like covered in blood. Whiskers are covered in blood. He's like, this doesn't mean dick.
Fresh from the kill or whatever. That's
what you get for bringing my dog into the dream. He will bite the shit out of you, which I thought was so funny.
That's so good.
Okay, we're talking about the dog. We have to talk about, and this is Rennie Harlin's brilliance. This is something I think came from him because he loves dogs, and he was coming up with a way to bring Freddy back. And he actually came up with the dog can pee fire onto Freddy's grave, and that will bring him back because he loves dogs. And there was a person in the documentary saying that he had a whole thing about one animal connecting to another animal through this fluid, that it was like supposed to be this thing. But that but that supposedly James Cameron like bumped into Rennie Harlin after he got hired for this job, and he was like kind of derisive, congratulations, how are you going to bring Freddy back this time? How are they going to bring him back this time? And for Rennie Harlin was like, a dog pees fire on him. But no, there's this, there is something about that the dog lives too, I think is a good thing. That is weird. That Kincaid, I just feel like Kincaid has forgotten what he learned in the last movie. He just kind of seems like he's not on guard. And even Joey's ready to just kind of go along with it,
When they buried Freddy in the third one, he put his bones in it, and then he like dance. He was like, yes, 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 over Freddy. Like, you don't celebrate Kincaid. After you fucking hurt Freddy, you don't celebrate. You get out of there. And he just got arrogant.
That's your chance to get out.
That's your chance to get out. And he takes this opportunity. He's like, yes, I can't believe it. Fuck this guy. Yeah.
Well, Kincaid's death,
Kincaid.
Joey's death in the waterbed, the scene in the hallway where they're talking and they walk past some lockers and there's just like slashes in the lockers.
Cool. Yeah.
But I have a question I'm building too, because I don't understand that moment. I don't understand what's happening in the classroom when Sheila dies. What's happening in the real world during much of this movie? Like, how, if Freddy's not fully back yet, how is there a slash in the locker? I just am like, I was very that? It's like I felt like this movie was very loose with like, okay, Freddy now has this power in the real world, like Joey in the real world. How did he get inside waterbed. I mean, I guess we're just accepting that the outcome of the dreams is getting more elaborate, and it's not like it was in the first couple, even in the third one, where something happens in the dream and then something else is happening in the real world, and we can see what that is. You know, this is more like somehow he magically got inside the waterbed. Somehow Freddy's slashing lockers and no one's saying anything about it, and it's just there. Or was that meant to be like, this is a philosophical, you know, this is like an image of what's happening, but it's not actually a literal image of what's going on in the school or something.
Right.
But I didn't know how you guys felt about that, the relationship between the real world and the dream world in this movie. And Steve, I have a feeling what you're saying is it doesn't really matter to you that much.
It doesn't matter.
But my question is not so much does it matter to you, but like, did you sense this movie having a little bit more of a different attitude about that
Definitely.
part of like showing you like this is because did Alice and Sheila both fall asleep during the test, and what did people in the room think was happening? And I don't know. You know, I kept thinking about that. It didn't really bump me, but I kept thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that the disconnect between like there's a 1-to-1 reaction of what's happening in the real world, like to what's happening while they're sleeping, like that is lost entirely. Like that's gone, you know.
They play a lot with time and perception of time and I told you how I feel about looping.
Oh, that loop.
That loop when it kept like, okay, so between, you know, they were trying to, I did really love that they tried to establish very early that this character experiences some level of like being out of her normal realm of consciousness sometimes and kind of, you know, in her imagination, which could also be a dream in certain circumstances. So you didn't know if it was real, a dream, or her imagination kind of working.
It's almost like a daydream.
Yes. Like it's daydream. And then once the loop started happening, I'm like, I'm done with this movie. I'm petrified. You know how I feel about Groundhog's Day is like my worst fear. Like, so the fact that we watched a Groundhog's Day movie that was actually really good, very recently, is good for me because I hate when things loop, man.
You're talking about Palm Springs?
Yeah, Palm Springs, and you know,
there was another one recently.
The first Happy Death Day.
Yeah,
the first Happy Death Day.
No, it was also
really
Boss
good.
Level.
Oh, Boss Level. That was the other one we were talking about. Yeah,
Boss Level.
No, but the loop aspect that is a good way that they don't do in these movies. I mean, it's like it was a new way to make us feel the dream logic kicking in a way that made your stomach kind of drop a little bit. And you're like, okay, what are they doing now? What can they do now? Like, are they just like, they don't even know what's going on. They're both asleep. One of them's asleep. You don't really know. I think that, I just think that was, that was an effective way to say, okay, what's a way of suggesting a dream that we haven't quite done? That is not, you know, again, it's great because it doesn't require effects. It doesn't require anything. It's just seeing the same thing happen again and again in this world, and you realize, okay, Freddy is controlling this. Freddy's influencing this. I love that she went into the dream, and when she got sucked into the movie, she lost one of her loafers, and that when you see her loafers falling off, she's got this like the like those white socks that are like turned down. Like I guess maybe in 1988, any average woman would wear those, and not only like a little kid, but it made her seem so childish, you know. And I love in that scene where she wakes up and she's got to go somewhere, and she realizes she's lost a loafer. She's like, I got to kick off this one loafer and get another pair of shoes. She leans off the bed. She picks up the other like plainest, dorkiest those little white sneakers that, I mean, again, it just is they're very dated. You could say it was very funny to me, like what a sort of dork Alice is, you know. Really until that scene where she gives herself the makeover, but no, I thought that scene, you sort of think, oh, now she's out because she detected that she lost the loafer in the other dream. And so I was fooled by that loop the first time. Like, I thought, oh, yeah. I'd forgotten some of the ins and outs of the story, so I was like, oh, they're going? Oh, wait, no? And then I couldn't remember how they all kind of end up in the same place. But I do think that final, whatever we want to call that moment where all the souls inside Freddy bust out of him and start, you know, that's a really great death, quote unquote, for Freddy. It's rough to the point where you're like, not so much like I feel bad for Freddy, but you're like that fucking sucks, dude. It's like that.
It does.
The soul's ripping. That's tough to look at. Yeah,
like ripping his head apart. Anytime someone's head is ruined in that way, it's always unsettling to see like the jaw and the head separate and the person still alive.
When King Kong does that That's like his go-to movies. He's like, I'm gonna rip your face open.
Yeah.
I hate that, man. I'm just like, I don't want to see
once
it.
I got my hands in there. Right.
Stop. Yeah. Stop. Turn it off.
No, don't grab his jaw.
Yeah.
Don't grab the jaw.
Once he goes like that, once he gets his hands down, it's over.
It's done.
It's like, no. So yeah, it was practical. I really hope that if there's another Freddy, which there will be at some point in our lives, that they really do try to put some practical stuff in there. There really is something, especially the way that Freddy attacks people. You know, we've talked about The Thing and the practical effects in that. There's something about seeing things interact with some of the characters that really makes whatever it is that Freddy is, whatever entity he is, seems so much scarier than a couple of special effects kind of firing off in the background. I think it's so cool, and it feels like this is the blueprint. What I've realized more and more as I've watched, this is the film that so many films are based off of. The dynamic between some of the characters, the scary character, the main character, that is kind of the force. You know, people have tried to invent Freddy a million different times through, you know, smaller films, bigger films. Nothing really replicates. You know, we all know the rules, we all know the setting, and besides Jason, he's really the only character that I guess the Leatherface, maybe. There's really only a couple characters that we know the rules, we know the setting. And anytime we're around that sort of thing, like, oh man, you're gonna go to sleep early, well, Freddy's gonna get you. I've heard a kid say that very recently. Like, this guy is decades old. A little kid is like, Freddy will haunt your dreams if you go to sleep.
That's trouble to me, because I thought our generation could keep that secret and it would just die out. But you're saying the children are already talking about it, so we might have to do something. Right? We might have to get involved. So does anyone have like a favorite death, a favorite kill scene from we kind of talked about from the other one? Philip's scene was the one that kind of stuck with us the most. I think there's a couple of these that you know have the potential to reach iconic status. I guess I'll just say it. I think the Roach Motel death is gruesome enough that like the whole body horror aspect of the roach parts busting out through her skin and then like falling in the sticky stuff and her face getting stuck and pulling her face up, and eventually her skin just sloughs off of the roach that's inside her body. I have to say that you know, the protracted nature of that. I think in both cases it's very funny. At the beginning, when she stomps on the roach and grinds it into the pavement, it becomes like this weird paste with no roach parts in it. And then when Freddy squishes the roach motel that she's inside, after
same thing,
into a roach, but it's not even the same. It's like apple juice squirts out this time. But it's like just the protracted nature of that death, that she both gets her arms broken and then turns into a roach and then gets stuck and then gets squished. Yeah, it's a really elaborate death, and it's one of those like kind of mean ones too, where that character really didn't do, you know, anything in particular that, you know, marked her. Like, she didn't mock Freddy the way that Kincaid did or anything. I guess she did say like, I don't believe in you or whatever when he's standing over her. But that's kind of an odd thing to say to someone who's literally standing over you at that moment. It's almost like she's seen too many movies where saying I don't believe in you makes the demon go, no. She expected that to work.
My favorite's probably Sheila's death, mostly because I sad that she left, because I had like a real life crush on Sheila. She's so pretty, really funny. She pretty much burns the exercise lady every scene that they're in. She's just like
my favorite line of hers was when she's teasing Alice about liking Dan. What does she say? She's like oh my God, what is it? It's like, hey, handsome, care for some buns?
Yes.
Like that.
That was so funny. Yes. In the diner. Yeah, that was
Care
it was
for some buns.
Care for some buns.
She
made fun of her, and then she's like, "All right, bye. See you later."
Right. No, I was gonna say the actress doesn't want us to think she's mean. Maybe the director was saying that, but it's funny that she's like tacky and kind of sarcastic with Deb after that. It's like, Deb, there is life after exercise, Yeah. And then she's like, mind over matter, and she kind of looks down at Deb's body when she says that, and then she's like, all right, see you later. But I love you.
Yeah, so that's probably my favorite.
So Sheila and Deb. What about you, Steve? Is there a death that
just to mix it up? I'm gonna go with Joey's.
Okay.
Mainly because it's a throwback to Glenn from Johnny Depp in part 1, and also just because I really like Joey as a character between 3 and 4. And I mean, I mentioned it about 3, and even more so here. Like that whole scene is just built around like MTV and just like you're saying, like what a 15-year-old boy wants to watch or whatever he was saying. But just just throwing back to it's very simple compared to the others, but it's just playing on, the same thing that almost got Joey in number 3, the sexy nurse and, the nudity. It's like, you see him fall into the same trap, but this time he's not getting out of it. And I think it's just even more tragic and scary and sad that he never leaves his bed, just like Glenn didn't. This is like one of the safest places maybe he thought he could be now that he's like out and living a life. And I just think it's just a really cool scene too, the way it's shot, I think. Because when it gets towards the end of the scene, when they're actually like, when you see them like kind of battling in the water, there's an overhead shot of like, where Freddy actually has him and you see the claw come up and it's the overhead shot of the claw like straightening out.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes over and you see the water just turn red. It's just a cool shot. And it's not like, it's not as
it's that blood mixing with water thing, Steve, I was talking about. When you see that much blood in the water, you're just like, oh boy,
it's just not good. I just remember like seeing that shot and coming down and the blood. And you're like, oh my God, damn it. They got him. Like, cause I like that character a lot. And it wasn't as big as the Glenn one, but there's also, it just ends really cool too. Like the headphone jack pulls out of the thing, the equalizer goes down, and it's a wide shot of the room and it's just like lit up and it looks so 80s and it's just like this glowing red waterbed and just like, damn, Joey's done.
Well, his mom then comes in to discover him like a scene later. Yeah. And I'm actually surprised with Joey's like whole thing about like he's all about the boobs or whatever.
Yeah.
I was surprised they resisted, especially with it being Rennie Harlan. I'm surprised they resisted the mom saying something like, "I'm tired of picking up your sticky fucking socks" or something like that. But it really was. You're right. It was like what got him. It's funny that like his weakness is he's a heterosexual teenager boy.
Yeah, basically.
Basically, and really Kincaid didn't really have a weakness, so. He didn't have like a thing that put him in the crosshairs. His death was like, you think his overconfidence or something?
Yeah, man. His ego or
but that's not like what was used against him. Freddie would have killed him somehow.
No, you're right.
You don't think that extra couple seconds that he celebrated, he could have gone through the junkyard?
No, that's true.
He could have.
True.
He
let him do it.
You're like, go ahead.
Do your thing. This is going to be over real quick.
He's like, touchdown pass.
But the dog lives. That's all that really matters.
Jason.
And at the end of the movie, I only have one question. What the hell happened to Dr. Neil Gordon?
I don't know, man. That's a really good question.
I mean, I'm surprised they didn't throw in a sentence where one of the kids said, "You heard about Dr. Neil Gordon dying in a wreck," or what. I'm just surprised they didn't just figure out something to do. Technically, he's still out there. I wonder if Craig Wasson just asked for too much money. Craig Wasson. I don't know how to say it. He's also in Body Double, which is another 80s movie that from around the same time that I was just happened to be watching this week because a podcast that I listened to, they're talking about it this week. And it's like, it was just weird to be like all up in Craig Wasson's grill for like this week. It's like, why did this become Craig Wasson week for me? And in both cases, it's like, he's not bad. He's really not bad at all. He's just super bland. He's just like the most milquetoast sort of guy. But, I don't know, maybe actors like that have a place because you're able to just kind of, like it's great to have a leading man who doesn't call too much attention to himself in a movie.
Milquetoast.
That's probably why they didn't come back to him.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe he was in the movie. I just didn't notice.
Oh man. So yeah, I mean, again, we kind of were going over this box office stuff though. You know, wherever it lands after we confirm where the Nightmare One ends up, whether it's with or without inflation, regardless, for the time when this came out, this again, from movie over movie, you know, you're seeing progress in terms of the box office, and the budget's really going up minimally, you know, between 3 and 4, and you know, the box office is, it's a little more than 3, but at that time it was you know, it was the highest grossing one in the series. So obviously the series plows on, but I think, again, I think there was like a perfect storm. I think there's the idea, and I can remember, like we talked about it in the last episode, like just how Freddy was everywhere, you know, in the late 80s. And, you know, it really is kind of when he was in the mainstream. And, you know, I would probably guess there was around 3 or 4 when I went and had that picture taken that we talked about on the last episode on the boardwalk in Ocean City. And yes. I'm sure at some point on that trip, I had my Dream Warriors shirt on. Obviously I took it off, but I mean,
you whipped it off for the shot. Cause you got to,
you got to. But yeah, I don't know. It just, my memory of Nightmare on Elm Street, obviously I remember going to see all these movies for the most part, you know, as they went on, especially from this point forward, in the theaters when they came out. But this period, you know, I was only like maybe 8 years old and watching these movies or whatever. And I just have a very distinct memory of like Freddy was fucking everywhere. Like just the character of Freddy Krueger between this movie and even, you know, going into like, you know, 5 and 6, there was just so much Freddy merchandise and, you know, talk show appearances in character. And like, it was just wild, like how much he had penetrated the mainstream media and pop culture in general. And again, MTV. And it's just wild to see how those things all mix together. And, you know, these movies really hit at the right time. And I think this one really, you know, for whatever faults, you know, it has, it still was pretty positively received, like not like 3 or not like 1, but, you know, the box office success, not being completely panned, getting onto MTV. And I think that Rennie Harlan, like really kind of, this was like a launch pad for him. Like, you know, this is what kind of throws him into, you know, Die Hard 2 a year or 2 later. And, you know, and his filmography that goes on from like, you know, into the early 90s. And he kind of has that reputation of this is the kind of movie that he makes. But I don't know. These two, I loved watching these two again for this podcast.
Yeah.
And it was like, I just have those moments where I want to just go watch all of them, but just sectioning it out and watching these two back to back the other night, it was just like, oh man, I hope that I want to see more Freddy. Like you said, Ronald, I hope they can do something more with the franchise, something better than they've done in recent, you know, years. But I hope they maybe can find some way to do something like this. Maybe not as like, maybe not as silly in some ways as 4 was, but I just want to see a bunch of characters that I like care about, like working together and in a creative, you know, way. I don't know. And I think that they really kind of found that and were able to exploit that a bit in these two for sure.
Well, seeing the characters work together really is one of the high points of this movie, so much so, and I think this is something that we might have touched on, but I do think it's worth mentioning, is that when you die, if you're killed by Freddy, you are buried in the special Freddy's Victims section of the cemetery, where you have Nancy's grave marker, yes. Kincaid's grave marker, and Kristen's grave marker all right next to each other. I just think that's really beautiful. Yeah, no, it's really beautiful. It's like they're together even in death. They rot in the ground together. It's
like a special area in the Springwood Cemetery or Springfield.
Probably the whole fucking
Springwood. Yeah,
Springwood. Did I say Springfield earlier?
Yeah,
Springwood.
Springwood.
So anybody that was screaming at their podcast earbuds. Their podcast earbuds at their earbuds.
They have special earbuds they wear only for podcasts.
They're listening to music. They take them out.
Nope, these are on my podcast earbuds.
But yeah, I thought that was hilarious. It's like that's just a little bit of movie nonsense. It's like that shot was designed to make you think of the characters that have died, not to make you really think about why would they all be. But if it is true that the entire Springwood Cemetery is probably Freddy's Victims, now that I think about it, so maybe maybe they're running out of space in there. No, I think that we should enjoy this moment because this episode we kind of ran long because these movies give us a lot to talk about. These are like peak Freddy. This is like peak for the series.
That's true.
The next, like the first episode we did, we had one like classic and one that was pretty okay. This time we had another classic and another like pretty solid, maybe a near classic for the genre.
Oh no!
It doesn't get better from here. It never gets this good again.
It does not.
For the
You're
series,
absolutely
we
right.
have 5 more movies in this Watch 'Em All, and none of them are as good as what we just watched. With Freddy versus Jason has some debatable
Freddy versus Jason
aspects
is
to
up
it.
there to me.
Yeah.
Super fun, and I think New Nightmare is.
No, I think New Nightmare is
interesting.
really interesting. I watched it recently. I don't think it ever got. It's still not as good as the hype,
You're right.
but it's like
You're
it's
right.
definitely better than the next episode is the one that really is the bleak times. So it's kind of cool that those two are together in one episode as well.
True.
The Dream Child and Freddy's Dead is what's next. Probably in the next couple months we'll find the time to do that. But no, I'm glad you guys hung in there with me because it's been kind of a long day and I've been kind of fighting sleep all day. And as soon as this is over, I'm just gonna lay down and just get some rest. I
need to get you some no-dos. How about some no-dos?
No, what did they call it? God, there was.
I think
Hypnocil is the dream suppressant.
Yeah.
But there was another like over-the-counter looking don't sleep pill that they were drinking.
Yes.
They were
That
eating
was
in
like
the
the
first
package.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was called now though. Like Sleep No More or something like that. Sleeping all, dreaming all, waking all, waking up, wake 'em up, watch 'em all. I don't know what it was called, but.
Yeah, I'm seeing Hypnocil. I think you're right. There was something else, but Hypnocil is what I'm seeing everywhere.
Well, see, here's something I noticed too, and it doesn't make sense because 4 had a budget that was at least as big as 3's, I believe. But in 3, there's product placement galore.
Yeah.
And I was noticing in 4 there were a couple like fake soda cans, but then also I think there is somebody. I think there are some name brand products that started creeping in where I was like, okay, so it's not like they ran out of money and they couldn't 4 they would have been able to get whatever products to sign on that they did for 3 because 3 was such a big hit. So yeah, this is the apex of the series. This is when they were. You're right. This is when they were like mainstream culture. Like,
Yeah, it was everywhere. I mean, there was a cardboard cutout of Freddy Krueger on the boardwalk in Ocean City, Maryland. Like that's right next to things like the Karate Kid and like.
I still think it's weird that you think that was
Doc
a cutout
Brown.
and not Freddy, because I think that.
I was
a photo that's proof of Freddy, and you're not even talking about it.
I was told that. I mean, I'm trying not to oversell because we're not trying to permeate this. Remember, like I'm trying to kill it right now, John.
Are your parents from Springwood by any chance?
Checks notes, unfortunately, and they did prepay for a couple burial plots in the same area.
Why'd you guys move away from Springwood? We were just trying to get away. There was some heavy shit that went down, and we just tried to get away. We just had to go.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. This is the. I'm very excited to go to the next pair because I can't wait to hear what Ronald thinks of them. Because I
can't wait
because I don't know if he even has ever seen them.
No.
Yeah.
I have not.
Great. This is great. This is wonderful. So that'll be a really fun episode.
I think it's been since we did the Sleepaway Camp series.
Yeah.
That we are required to watch multiple movies for an episode that neither of which are good. I think you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe I'm being too hard on Dream Child, but I remember it being like the ugliness and the kind of silliness. It's like everything was kind of reaching a fever pitch in my mind in 5. And then 6, I don't even remember much about 6 at all, except that Johnny Depp comes back and like runs around in a video game at some point.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got.
Well, he comes back for like an infomercial.
Okay.
Like a don't do drugs.
Okay.
Infomercial
It's just on the television though.
Yeah.
But there is a video game death in that, right? So maybe I'm just remembering.
Yes,
maybe
there
I'm
is.
just remembering those two.
And I think
together.
that's the one that Breckin Meyer's in, right?
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Yeah. Wow. Maybe I don't know. We'll see.
Got that to look forward to.
Yeah. Good stuff.
John Arbuckle himself from the Garfield films, right?
Is that Breckin Meyer?
I think it is.
Or is that Jason Lee?
Jason Lee's Alvin and the Chipmunks. He's Dave.
Okay, he's Dave.
And Neil Patrick Harris is in some other movie.
I don't even know if I've seen.
Smurfs.
I don't know if I've seen the Garfield films. But I hope you're right. I can't wait.
I hope I'm not right because it means I know something about the Garfield films that isn't common knowledge. But John Arbuckle, I guess I do know the character's full name. Anyway, that's a tangent. But that was Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and 4. I'm with you, Steve. This was fun. Like, these movies loom large in my mind, and this was the one that I was kind of like, okay,
excited for you. Yeah,
there's going to be a lot to talk about here. So.
Well, like John said, we'll get back together in the next month or two and kind of go through 5 and 6 with another episode of this series. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe. Please find us on YouTube, where we also have a special series that we do every weekend called Marvel Schmarvel, that we talk about all properties, all things having to do with Marvel. It's a YouTube only series, comes out every weekend. So if you want to go there, you can subscribe to the YouTube page and you'll get updates on podcast feeds like this one and also the Marvel Schmarvel 2 for 1. And if you're listening to them on your special podcasting earbuds like John has, you can subscribe wherever you're listening if you wouldn't mind. If there's an option to review it or rate it, we'd love that too. And just tell somebody about the podcast if you are subscribed. We'd love to get to some new listeners if that's possible. And if you do, thank you for that in advance. What else we got? I think next week we're going to be talking, or in the next couple weeks, at some point we're going to talk about the new Mortal Kombat movie, I hope. Something's coming
Bob
up.
Odenkirk movie. Nobody's
coming up. Yep, we'll be able to see that. And so next couple weeks will be fun. Movieshmovie.com is the main website, but if you want to find past episodes, if you're not on YouTube, not on a podcasting app, pod.link/movieshmovie is where we kind of try to get everybody to go. It's a really nice site. You can listen to everything right there that we've ever put out. You don't have to go anyplace else. It's right there. And it's pretty easy to navigate once you get there. Take your pick, please. We'll be back in a new episode next week. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.
Fight!
You got the little bouncing character.